I know you've heard before that if you just keep going, you will eventually build momentum. Or you've probably heard that you need to be more disciplined, that growth is all about mindset, expansion is all about execution, and scaling is about strategy. I'm not here to add another productivity framework, to tell you to work harder, or to question your work ethics. I'm here to address something deeper. Because if you're watching this, chances are you're already disciplined. You already work hard. You're already intelligent and very capable. And you've probably achieved some levels of success in your career, in your business, or in your personal life. So I'm not here to discredit or repeat what we already know. At a certain level, those explanations stop being useful. And it's not because they're wrong. It's not because they're inaccurate. It's just that they're incomplete. You see, most high performing women and men aren't stuck or don't stall because of lack of effort. They're stuck because their loyalty is to the identity that earned their legitimacy. They remain stagnant or plateaued because they're more loyal to an old identity, which, by the way, this old identity that I'm referring to was or probably is still a rock star in their own right. However, this old identity, this old version of you was engineered for a previous level of success and authority. There is an expiration date on identity, whether we name it or not. And because identity is rarely discussed at the level it deserves, people continue upgrading behaviors instead of examining who is operating the system. They adjust habits, optimize routines, optimize messaging, optimize strategy. But guess what? Optimization cannot outgrow architecture. It cannot outgrow the system because your identity is not just a collection of behaviors. It is a structural agreement about who you are allowed to be based on the version of authority you were calibrated to hold at that time. The energetic contract that you formed when that identity was first established or created. And when that agreement was written for a previous altitude, it will quietly resist expansion when an upgrade is required. Think about your computer system. When the operating system is outdated, it doesn't immediately lose functionality. It still runs, it still performs basic tasks, it still looks intact because it's still operational. But the moment you intend to install more advanced software, you attempt to increase capacity or integrate newer, higher level tools, the system begins to lag. It may even crash every so often when you're in the middle of that most important assignment, right? And when an upgrade becomes available, you have a choice. You can either postpone it, you can continue working inside the current version of the operating system because it still works. But over time, that performance is going to become inconsistent. Incompatibility is going to increase as some programs will no longer be able to function on that old operating system. And at this point, no matter what you do, the only thing that gets your computer back to optimal performance is a system upgrade. And identity operates the same way. The version of you that was once calibrated for excellence and success at one level will eventually become incompatible with the authority that's required at the next level. When you think about how many high achievers, founders, executives, creatives who've had success at one stage of their career and then suddenly they plateau at the next, it's rarely because they became less intelligent. It's rarely because they stopped working hard or because opportunities disappeared. What often happens is a lot more subtle. They continue executing, but from an outdated operating system. And just over a year ago, this would not have been identifiable to me in this way. I would have called it a strategy gap or bad timing. I would have said I needed to restructure, needed to reposition, needed to rebrand. I would have looked externally for refinement. This is what we've been taught to do, right? In every aspect of life, we're taught the answers are outside of us. But what I was actually encountering was internal incompatibility. Imagine you spend years in this provisional space waiting for the right timing, not because you don't want to claim more, or not because you don't want to lead, or because you don't want to expand and rise into your next level, but because claiming more requires you to let go of the identity that you are consciously or subconsciously clinging to. Because in all of what you've learned about mindset, beliefs, and strategy, the missing awareness is energetic alignment with identity. Identity is the root configuration. Think about it like this: beliefs influence what you perceive, strategy determines what you do, but identity governs who you allow yourself to be. It sets the ceiling for what feels safe. It sets the range for what feels accessible. It sets the boundary for what feels like you. So although you may upgrade your thinking, you may refine your habits, you can even execute flawlessly. If your internal agreement about who you are remains anchored to a previous version of power or authority or you, your expansion will always feel negotiated and provisional. And what this looks like in real life is you assuming a provisional posture that lives between your existing identity and your next version or your upgraded identity. And provisional authority does not look the same in everyone. Of course not. It expresses itself through a number of recognizable identity postures because authority is protected and projected in different ways. Some of you operate as the capable one. Your MO is you can handle it. You got this. You always have, and hopefully you won't have to always will. You absorb responsibility quietly. You step in without having to be asked. You carry weight without complaint. This identity built your resilience. It earned trust, and it's probably got you through some unstable seasons. But over time, capacity becomes a ceiling. You become resourced at the level of you yourself and you, one person. And the core trap is if I can handle it, I should. But leadership is not about what you can handle. Au contraire, it's more about what you should no longer be handling, right? And then there are other postures. There's the reasonable one. You don't want to disrupt or ruffle any feathers. You negotiate your standards. You delay making firm decisions. This identity likely protects your relationships. It probably stabilizes the environments that you're in and makes you likable and trusted. But again, leadership is going to create disruption, and standards will create some level of friction. Authority is going to make some people uncomfortable. And as long as you're more concerned about being perceived as difficult or disruptive than you are about being definitive, your authority will remain negotiated. There are a few more postures that I have identified, like the flexible one, the earn it identity, the steady one. And if you're listening to this and recognizing yourself in a provisional space of authority, if you feel stuck and not able to step into that next version of who you know you're meant to be, that is not a motivation problem and it's not a strategy problem. And that recognition is also not a flaw. It's the awareness that's actually required to interrupt the patterns and consciously redesign it. Because you cannot recalibrate, you cannot change what you have not first identified and named. And this is why I created the identity posture audit, because I needed language for what I was living, what I was experiencing. And if you're recognizing yourself in this, I've made it available to you as well. Not as any sort of mindset work, but as a mirror, so that you can identify which postures you default to under provisional authority. Because once you see the posture, you can no longer confuse it for personality. And once you stop confusing it for personality, you regain the power to upgrade your internal operating system, AKA your identity. So you can scan the QR code. It's going to be on the screen. or go to the description of this video and download the free identity posture audit, which for me was the first step in identifying the subtle and obvious ways I was still operating provisionally. It was my wake-up call that I was more loyal to staying in my comfort zone, assuming an identity that, yes, I am proud of, because Lord knows that version of me was super resilient. She was fearless, but she was still very tempered. She shattered some ceilings and broke stereotypes. She gave me wisdom as a teen mom, gave me the courage to venture into entrepreneurship. I mean, if I may say so myself, she's pretty badass, right? Every time people counted me out, and even when I counted myself out, she rose like the phoenix that I am. But there was a point in my life where I can say that I felt her fire begin to simmer. And from then to now, I've seen me live through maybe every single one of those provisional postures. I recognize the capable one immediately. I've always been the one who could handle anything life threw at me. The steady one, always waiting for a season to pass, delaying decisions and negotiating my standards. The earn it identity, waiting for a moment that I would feel undeniable enough. None of those identities were weak. They were intelligent adaptations for the version of me that needed them. But none of those postures would ever stabilize the level of authority that my vision and your vision demands. So going back to the computer analogy, my internal operating system still functioned, right? On the surface, everything looked pretty fine. It could execute, it could produce, it could respond, but it could not sustain the level of processing required for the scale of vision I was beginning to hold. So it would overheat under pressure, sometimes externally and definitely internally, right? Figuratively and literally. And every time the demands increase, every time the vision expanded, I could feel the lag in performance and in posture. And so even though I was still over functioning where I should have been delegating, explaining where I should have been defining, waiting for alignment where I should have been establishing alignment, the system was not broken. The system was outdated. And an outdated system does not collapse immediately. It strains quietly. It crashes from overload. And then it becomes stagnant. And here's the beauty. You get to choose to upgrade your system or to remain at a plateau. And I finally opted for the upgrade. The old system was reliable. The new system had to be sovereign. And sovereignty is not installed through effort. It is installed through identity. The woman building her empire cannot be calibrated for provisional authority. She cannot be internally negotiating whether she is ready. She must be internally settled in her becoming. And that is the upgrade for me. What is the upgrade for you? Where are you still operating from an identity that once worked, but no longer fits the scale of your vision? What would change if you stopped waiting and started finalizing? If this resonated, I invite you to go ahead and download the free identity posture audit. Again, it's not a checklist. It's not mindset work. It is a mirror to identify the posture you default to under provisional authority and to begin consciously upgrading that internal operating system that governs your next level, your dream career, your business, your dream life. And if you're ready to tap into the frequency of your next level, I share weekly transmissions on identity, energy, and alignment in my newsletter, The Empire Frequency. You are invited to join me there. And of course, here on my YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe, like, and share, because upgrading your identity is not a one-time decision. It is a calibration. So meet me here again next time. And remember, upgrade the identity, claim the authority, and build the empire that only you can. Peace and love.